Back in 2021, I was working the graveyard shift at a small diner-style pizza joint in a quiet town just outside of Harrow Falls. I was 27 and preferred late shifts since they were slow and peaceful most nights. The place was open 24/7, but let's be honest, nobody came for the food. What brought people in were the hours. Drunks, night shift workers, and the occasional insomniac wandered in, mostly after midnight. That night started off like any other. I clocked in at 9 p.m., swapped out with the day guy, and began setting up the kitchen. Tuesdays were always slow, and I was looking forward to an easy shift. I checked the freezer, prepped a few doughs, and made sure the register was balanced. With everything ready, I sank into my usual chair in the back and started scrolling through my phone. Between 9 and 1, I served maybe 3 customers, 2 walk-ins and 1 delivery. By 1 a.m., the place was dead silent. I was halfway through a stupid meme video when I heard the front doorbell chime. That bell only rang when the door was physically opened. Curious, I got up and walked to the counter that faced the dining area. But when I stepped into the front, no one was there. I scanned left and right, even checked under the front windows, thinking someone might be crouched down. But it was empty, dead quiet. My first thought was maybe I imagined it, or the wind pushed the door. I opened the front door to check, but there wasn't a soul in sight. Not on the sidewalk, not in the parking lot. It was eerie, but I laughed it off, chalking it up to exhaustion. I fiddled with the door a bit, trying to make the bell ring without opening it. It wouldn't. The chime was wired directly to the hinge. So how had it rung if no one came in? Still, I returned to the kitchen and sat back down. I figured maybe it was a glitch. I mean, old place, old wiring, it was possible. About 15 minutes passed when it rang again. This time, I hadn't even looked away from my phone, and I was completely alert. The bell had definitely gone off. I jumped up and walked fast to the front, fully expecting someone this time. But again, no one. The dining area was deserted. I pushed through the door, stepped outside, and scanned the area. Empty parking lot. No cars. No people. No footsteps. The wind wasn't blowing. Nothing had touched that door. At this point, my confusion was starting to grow into a gnawing discomfort. Something didn't sit right with me. I stayed near the front for the next 30 minutes, just waiting for the door to ring again. But it didn't. The silence returned, and I finally walked back to the kitchen. It was close to 2:45 a.m., always the deadest hour of the night. I was mentally checked out when the chime rang for the 3rd time. I didn't even get up this time. I just called out, "Hello." There was no answer. I listened for movement, footsteps, anything, but nothing followed. I considered calling someone, but who would I even tell? Hey, the doorbell keeps ringing, but no one's here. For another hour, I didn't get a single customer. Around 4 a.m., I decided to start prepping for the morning shift. I walked to the front and began counting the cash in the register. That's when the tension hit me. The room felt wrong, like the air was heavier. I found myself looking over my shoulder every few seconds, checking both the dining area and the back hallway. The stillness wasn't peaceful anymore. It was dense, alerting. I tried to shake it off, assuming it was just the weird door incident getting in my head. But deep down, something told me to stay ready. As I turned back to the register, I heard a sharp thump, like a heavy boot stomping on the tiled floor behind me. My heart spiked. I spun around immediately. Standing just a few feet away was a man. He had torn, black clothes with a hood pulled low over his face. His eyes were bloodshot, lifeless, and he was clutching a knife so tightly his knuckles were white. I froze. Completely. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stood there, glaring at me with an unhinged stare, the blade hanging low by his side, glinting in the fluorescent light. "Look, you can take the money," I said, my voice cracking. "I won't stop you. Just don't hurt me." I tried to sound calm, but my knees were trembling. He didn't flinch. He didn't speak. He just stared, like a predator watching its prey freeze before the strike. That kind of silence is worse than yelling. It's calculated. I looked at my only escape, the front door. But to get there, I'd have to run toward him around the counter. That wasn't going to work. He was way too close. So I did something desperate. I launched myself over the counter. It wasn't graceful. I hit the floor hard, but it got me past him. I jumped up and bolted for the door. I heard his footsteps pounding behind me, fast and chaotic. I burst through the front entrance just as he lunged. He missed me by a second. I ran, sprinting into the street. My car was behind the building, and there was no way I could reach it. I didn't even look back. I just kept running, hoping someone might drive by or hear me. At some point, I realized I wasn't being chased anymore. I slowed down, breathing like I'd run a marathon, and pulled out my phone to call the police. My hands were shaking. It took them 5 minutes to arrive. By then, the man was gone. But he hadn't left quietly. He'd gone back into the pizza shop and completely trashed the place. Chairs were flipped, dishes shattered, register destroyed. He even exited through the back and carved deep, jagged lines into the side of my car with his knife. It was a message. What really messed me up was realizing something else. The last time the doorbell rang was over an hour before I saw him. That means he might have already been inside, hiding, waiting, watching me from some dark corner or crouched behind a booth. The door ringing was probably just a distraction to throw me off. That made it all worse. This wasn't just some random robbery, it was calculated. He had planned it, and he had been in there with me for who knows how long. Police never found him. No prints, no camera footage, nothing. I quit the job not long after. I didn't want to risk being there again if he came back. And honestly, I still don't know if it was random or personal. His rage felt directed, not just chaotic. But I never saw him before that night. At least, I don't think I did. I try not to think about it now. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear phantom doorbells ring in my head. And I always wonder if he's still out there, watching someone else through a window. Back in 2021, I was grinding hard with 2 jobs, hoping to finally afford my own condo. My main job was a tech support position at a small firm in Weston, Illinois. But to earn a bit more, I picked up deliveries in the evenings through a local app called SwiftDrop. Some weeks, I clocked nearly 30 hours just delivering. It was exhausting, sure, but the extra money made it worth it. One Friday evening around 6:30 p.m., I had just finished dinner when I started up the app and hit the road. That night seemed promising, one good tip after another. Orders were flowing in steadily, and I was riding the high of a good hustle. Honestly, I should have quit while I was ahead, but greed has a way of pulling you in. It was almost 11 p.m., and the orders had started to slow down. The last few deliveries were average at best. Just as I considered calling it a night, an offer popped up, $19.25 for a single order about 15 minutes away. I took it without hesitation. The food was ready when I arrived at the restaurant, and I loaded it into the passenger seat. The delivery address was in a wooded area I had never driven through before. Still, the GPS seemed sure, so I followed along. The roads grew darker and more isolated, winding through dense trees. I double-checked the map a few times, convinced I'd made a wrong turn. But the route was right, just incredibly remote. Eventually, I reached a gravel road leading into a forest reserve. It looked official enough, with a small sign reading, Everpine Preserve. There were 2 short pillars at the entrance with a chain between them, but the chain was lowered. I hesitated but drove in anyway, the gravel crunching beneath my tires. My headlights struggled to cut through the darkness ahead. A minute later, I rolled into a small clearing that seemed like a parking area. Confused, I looked around. There were no visible houses or cabins, just trees and silence. Then I spotted a wooden board with faded print. Everpine Forest Preserve, open sunrise to sunset. Strange, considering it was well past midnight. As I reached for my phone to figure out what was going on, it rang. The caller ID said customer. I answered, and a deep, raspy male voice greeted me. Hey, I see you've parked. Can you see our fire? His voice was so gravelly, I could barely understand him. I looked out the window but saw nothing. He explained that he and his friends were camping a little off-trail, and that I should be able to spot their campfire if I walked down a bit. I mentioned that I thought the preserve was closed at night, but he told me they had a permit for overnight camping. I wasn't exactly outdoor savvy, so I didn't question it further. Maybe that's why the tip was so generous. I grabbed the food, turned off the engine, and stepped out. The darkness was intense, no overhead lights, no moon. I used my phone flashlight to scan ahead. There was only one trail leading out of the lot. I figured I'd follow it for a short distance and look for their fire. The night was eerily quiet. No insects buzzing, no laughter or chatter. Just wind rustling the trees and my footsteps crunching along the path. After about 2 minutes, I spotted an orange flicker in the distance. A fire, just like he said. But something was off. It wasn't close to the trail. It was deeper in the woods, surrounded by thick trees. I stepped off the path, the ground soft beneath my shoes. As I got closer, things didn't feel right. The campfire was small and oddly tidy, burning alone in the dark with no one around it. There were no tents, no backpacks, no chairs. Just the fire crackling in the middle of nowhere. I barely had time to whisper, "What the hell?" before I heard a sharp snap behind me. I spun around toward the sound. In the shadows beyond the firelight, I could barely make out a tall figure. He was completely still, like he was trying not to be seen. My heart pounded. "Hey, I'm the delivery driver. I'll just leave the food here," I said nervously and placed the bag near the fire. The moment I stood up again, he stepped into the light. He was tall, scruffy, with unkempt dark hair and a patchy beard. His smile didn't match his eyes, forced, unsettling. "Sorry, didn't see you come up," he said in that same gravelly tone. I nodded, slowly backing up. The way he spoke, the way he appeared, none of it felt right. I don't know what it was, but every instinct in me screamed to leave. "You sure you don't want your food?" I asked, inching backward. He kept stepping forward, saying, "I've got cash for you, come on back." His tone was overly friendly, almost taunting. I didn't wait any longer. I turned and bolted through the woods, crashing through branches, my flashlight bouncing wildly. I didn't hear him chasing me, but I wasn't about to turn around and check. When I reached the lot, I fumbled with my keys, hands shaking. I got in and turned the ignition, just as my headlights lit up the path ahead. My heart dropped. The chain that had been lowered earlier was now latched back across the exit. There was no way I had time to get out and unhook it safely. I froze, trying to figure out what to do. Then I heard it, footsteps, crunching through the gravel behind my car. Slow, deliberate. I didn't look. I yanked the wheel and hit the gas, swerving off the gravel and onto the grass. It was tight, with a drainage ditch just a few feet away on either side of the pillars. My car scraped through, nearly tipping, but I made it. Once I was back on the main road, I didn't stop until I hit a gas station 10 miles away. I sat there, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. I never called the police. At the time, I thought it would be pointless. By the time anyone arrived, the guy would be long gone. Still, that decision haunts me. The next morning, curiosity got the best of me. I looked up Everpine Preserve online. According to the county website, it closed strictly at 8 p.m. every day. No overnight access. No camping. No fires. That confirmed everything I feared. Whoever that man was, he had no right being out there, and no harmless reason for luring me into the woods. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't run. But sometimes I wonder what was waiting in those shadows if I had taken even one step closer to that fire. In 2022, I worked a quiet overnight job at a tech facility on the edge of Marlow, Oregon. It was a small data center tucked inside a steel-walled warehouse surrounded by dense woods. There were no nearby businesses or homes, just the building and miles of empty land. My job was simple: monitor the systems and ensure all servers stayed online. If anything disconnected, I'd walk down to the appropriate operating room and restart the affected unit. It was mostly routine, nothing ever too complicated. Since I worked the night shift alone, I had the freedom to do whatever I wanted as long as I checked the systems every few minutes. That usually meant binging shows, gaming, or scrolling endlessly, anything to stay awake. But the job got lonely and repetitive. By the time the strange incident happened, I'd already thought about quitting at least a dozen times. The silence and isolation had started to wear me down. That night started like any other. I arrived at the facility around 10 p.m. The road there was a single stretch of cracked asphalt that faded into gravel, and the building stood quietly at the end, backed up by thick woods. I parked beside the metal loading dock and headed inside. The first thing I did was check the system monitors. Everything was functioning smoothly as usual, so I set up my laptop and started watching an old crime series I'd been hooked on that week. On overnights, issues with the systems were rare. Less internet traffic meant fewer disruptions. At most, I'd see 1 or 2 alerts a week, and they were usually resolved in seconds with a restart. That night I got through 2 full episodes, so it must have been around midnight when I noticed a red notification on the top monitor. One of the core storage servers had dropped offline. I paused my show and stood up. The alert displayed the row and section number. I knew the layout well by then. It was the back corner of the server room, a spot I rarely had to visit. I took the elevator down and passed through a series of narrow corridors until I reached the main server chamber. The room was massive, rows of tall, humming server racks stretched in every direction like a maze. I made my way to the final row. The air was cold, and the buzzing of machines filled the space like static. At the far corner, I found the affected server. The issue was immediately obvious. The main power cord had been completely unplugged. The heavy cable lay on the ground, as if someone had yanked it out. I stared at it, confused. Those industrial cords are nearly impossible to dislodge accidentally. I'd worked there over a year and never once seen one come loose on its own. I plugged it back in, powered up the system, and watched the green light blink back to life. Everything returned to normal. I assumed, maybe foolishly, that the vibration from the rack or a slow shift had caused it. Still, it unsettled me. I glanced down the nearby aisles but didn't see anything out of place. I did a quick walk through the server rows before heading back toward the main office. As I passed through one of the middle corridors, I heard it, a deep, echoing thud. It sounded like a heavy metal door slamming shut somewhere in the building. I froze. The sound came from somewhere ahead, but the warehouse layout was complicated. Some doors led to storage, others to utility rooms or supply closets. It could have been anything, or anyone. The building was old, and sometimes the pipes would creak or expand, making strange noises. But this sound was new to me. It didn't groan, it thumped, like someone forcefully shut a door. I made it back to the office and sat down, trying to shake the nerves off. The monitors all showed green now. I restarted my show, hoping it would drown out the creeping feeling that something wasn't right. Maybe 5 minutes later, I heard it, rapid footsteps echoing through the corridor outside the office. Not slow, but quick, light-footed, and very human. I jumped out of my chair. I rushed to the door and opened it, staring down the long hallway. Nothing. Just the empty corridor lit by flickering overhead lights. At the far end, the door was slightly ajar, but I hadn't noticed it before. I told myself to be logical. Maybe I imagined it, but my body didn't believe that. I grabbed my flashlight, stepped into the corridor, and walked cautiously to the far door. I pushed it open and looked down the next hallway. Just as I did, I caught it. The faintest glimpse of a metal door slowly closing at the other end, like someone had just gone through it. My pulse quickened. I moved toward it, each step echoing on the concrete floor. This hallway was lined with small, windowless office rooms, rooms I rarely entered and rarely thought about. "Hello," I called out. My voice bounced back to me. No response. I took a few more steps into the hallway, but the silence was suffocating. I could feel my own breath getting shorter. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe to catch a coworker pulling a prank, but I was the only one scheduled. My name was the only one on the overnight log. Just as I turned to leave, one of the office doors swung open violently. A man bolted out from the dark room, nearly colliding with me. I didn't see his face, just his outline and wild, erratic movements. I didn't stop to think. I turned and ran, sprinting down the corridor as his footsteps pounded behind me. I didn't look back. My only thought was to not get cornered. I reached the stairwell and shoved through the fire exit, bursting out into the cold night. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes as I ran toward my car parked under the flickering lot light. I fumbled for my keys, hands trembling. As soon as I got inside, I locked the doors and called the police. I kept glancing at the building, expecting him to come out. But he never did. The officers arrived quickly and did a full sweep. It took almost 40 minutes to check every room, closet, and emergency exit. But he was gone, vanished into the woods behind the warehouse. When I explained everything, they said he may have broken in hours earlier and hidden, waiting for the right moment. The disconnected cable now made sense. He probably bumped it while sneaking through the server racks. The company launched an investigation and reviewed security footage. I wasn't privy to the results, but I heard rumors that several cameras had mysteriously gone offline around 9 p.m. that night. No stolen hardware, no vandalism, just a man hiding where no one should have been. And worst of all, I think he was watching me long before I ever heard that first footstep. I never went back. I quit the next day. Whatever his purpose was, I don't want to know. Because whatever plan he had, I wasn't supposed to walk away from that night.